Senator Mitchell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just want to make a clarifying remark. As a very proud member of the Women's Caucus, it's important that I clarify that the Women's Caucus proposal and the Senate proposal here merely reflects what was current practice in law for a good number of years. Neither of these proposals suggest that we should fund museums. The court system also suggested in that a suit was brought and lost, and child care, early care, and education was a part of Prop 98 from 1989 until 2011. And so, is it a value statement? Absolutely it is. And what this proposal in the Women's Caucus is stating is that we are clear Prop 98 is an appropriate place for early care and education to be, which is where it was for decades. And in that, Prop 98 is currently experiencing an exponential increase in their funding. It's appropriate to put programs that were in it for decades back in it because they are early care and education. The debate about whether it's education or not was clarified by the court system. That's not even up for negotiation. And again, neither of those proposals are suggesting museums, transportation, trains, planes, tunnels. We are not. It's education, appropriate programs and services. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Mitchell. So, colleagues, we do have a motion before us. Again, this will be going to conference, so there will be further discussions and deliberations in the coming week. The motion is to accept the staff recommendation, which is reflective of the legislative proposal on page 6, and we will call the roll.
Leno?
Aye.
Leno, aye. Nielsen?
No.
Nielsen, no. Allen? Allen, aye. Anderson? No. Anderson, no. Bell? Aye. Bell, aye. Block? Block, aye. Hancock? Hancock, aye. Mitchell?
Aye.
Mitchell, aye. Monning?
Aye.
Monning, aye. Morlock? Morlock, no. Wynn? Pan?
Aye.
Pan, aye. Pavley? Pavley, aye. Roth? Roth, aye. Stone? Stone, no. Wolk? Wolk, aye. 11 aye, 4 noes.
11 for, the motion passes. Moving on to issue 5, which is the Prop 98 package on page 8. We have had a brief overview of it already, but Ms. Bosler, if you'd like to present, then we'll hear from the LAO.
Ridiculous.
Yes, the May revision reflects the revised Proposition 98 figures, which are providing the largest investment being the continued investment in the local control funding formula. And under the May revision level of revenues, we'll be closing the gap by 53% by providing $6.2 billion to that formula that is very important in providing additional monies to those districts that have high proportions of students from low-income families and families who are English language learners. We've also talked about a few of the other proposals that are reflected in the governor's budget, including a $500 million allocation for really growing our adult education consortium. Also, additional money that we talked at length about related to career tech, that's $400 million. And also cannot leave out that there is a $4.3 billion one-time investment in paying down some of the education debt that has accumulated over many years related to mandates. So that would be going to K-12 school districts and community colleges on an ADA basis. And that's $4.3 billion in additional one-time money that can be used for professional development, deferred maintenance, and other investments that are one-time in nature. So that's really the broad aspects of what was proposed in our May revision. And obviously the framework that the staff recommendation is based on the higher LAO revenues, and that we believe are highly speculative on whether those would come in.
Right. So. Thank you, Ms. Bosler. LAO.
Edgar Cabral with the LAO.
Just to provide you with some of the highlights of the package itself, very similar to the governance structure in that the primary increases in funding are related to paying off the mandates backlog and to funding increases in LCFF. The two major differences you've already discussed at length today. First of all, the package does include or does use the LAO's estimates of revenues and therefore the LAO's estimates of the proposition minimum guarantee. Because of those different assumptions, that increases the minimum guarantee by $172 million in 14-15 and $723 million in 15-16. In addition, this plan does also increase the minimum guarantee in 15-16 by $994 million to reflect the shifting of childcare into Proposition 98. Aside from many of the items you've already discussed, a couple other key areas in terms of 14-15 spending, this plan provides slightly less funding, $646 million less funding to pay down the mandate backlog for K-12 in 14-15. The governor provides 3.2. This plan provides 2.6. And the Senate plan also provides, in terms of one-time funding, provides $800 million. That's for additional professional development and teacher support that's distributed to school districts based on the number of teachers in their district. In terms of community colleges, it provides some additional funding for adult ed data in 14-15. In the budget year, the primary difference is LCFF, $276 million higher. The Senate package is than the governor. There's $50 million for school transportation equalization. And then in the community college side, there's a slight increase in apportionments, just $6 million, and then additional $25 million for the mandate backlog, an additional $25 million for physical plant and instructional equipment funding, and then this package rejects the governor's the $25 million to fund the Community College Innovation Awards, but provides $46 million in additional funding for various categorical programs.
Thank you, Mr. Cabral. With regard to the one-time, as you mentioned, $800 million for the educator effectiveness package, I think I had referenced that in my opening comments, around $2,700 per educator. Have we done anything like that in recent times?
Not this. So this proposal is a one-time. It's a one-time grant for a broad range of activities. I think in the past we've had various categorical programs that have been that were teacher support and professional development that were lumped together with some flexibility, but those were all sort of what used to be categorical programs and sort of were more like a categorical. This provides more flexibility than some of those, and it will also be on a one-time basis. And
what do you imagine teachers would benefit from an investment of $2,700 at the district level?
Well, I think what we've heard in terms of need, as you might have heard, need for helping with implementing the Common Core standards. And so one of the key pieces for implementing Common Core is providing professional development and training to teachers. So that is one of the things we would expect that there would be a demand for from school districts. I believe the language is flexible so that it could be used for something like that, or also to support struggling teachers, or also help cover costs of teacher induction. So I think the funding would be able to be, districts would be able to use the funding for a variety of things based on their needs.
But specific to educator effectiveness?
That's correct.
Great. Before we take public comment, any questions or comments from, yes, Ms. Bosley?
Yeah, I would just note that we haven't seen all the details on the educator effectiveness programs, and we'd be happy to take a look at those. I think we had a different approach to the one-time monies, really building off the approach we started last year about paying down the mandate debt and also providing the local school districts with the flexibility on how to utilize that money. I think we fully expect that some school districts will use it for teacher training programs and other things that benefit teacher training, but also there may be other priorities that local school districts have, so we had a more flexible approach on our one-time money. And I also just failed in my short overview to mention the community colleges. Our proposal does have an additional $600 million for various investments in the community colleges, including apportionment growth and also base growth, and then full-time faculty was also another priority that we made.
Thank you. Senator Stone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make sure I heard that right. The teacher evaluations, it would be $2,700 per teacher throughout the state of California. Is that correct?
Not evaluations, though.
Okay, that evaluation, this is a one-time evaluation of one-time
Teacher effectiveness.
teacher effectiveness, okay?
My understanding of the language is that it would provide, it's $800 million that would be distributed across the state based on to each local education agency based on the number of teachers that they have employed. And the funding could be used for a variety of things, including teacher professional development and training, support for struggling teachers, or to cover costs of induction and support in the first few years. That's I believe that, I haven't confirmed, but I believe the 2,700 number is if you divide the $800 million by the total number of teachers statewide, it's about $2,700 per teacher.
Okay, so a couple of questions. One, who's going to be doing these evaluations? And number two, I have a concern with the last budget item and this budget item that we're depending on the LAO's expectations, which is money that we haven't even received. I hope we do receive that kind of money. I know that Wall Street is watching these hearings rather closely. If we adopt these projections without any firm evidence that we're going to get these projections, can you tell me if this is going to have any effect on the credit rating of the state of California, and how that would affect our borrowing capacity, making it more expensive or less expensive?
So it's first, on terms of covering the issue of the teacher, I don't believe that anything in this proposal is requiring a teacher evaluation. I believe that the proposal is just $800 million for funding, for one-time funding that school districts can use to provide a variety of different supports.
So it's an open-end, $800 million school districts, whatever you can do to improve teaching, go ahead and master a program that can better educate teachers to teach our kids.
That's my understanding of what the proposal
That's a pretty loose allocation as far as I'm concerned. Can you go to the concept of depending on unrealized revenues as an effect on our bond rating?
We have our credit rating expert, Mr. Sisney.
Jason Sisney from the LAO. Yesterday, Standard & Poor's, one of the 3 rating agencies, placed the state's credit rating on Credit Watch Positive, which indicates the possibility of a higher credit rating. It seemed to be premised on the idea that the legislature would adopt a budget pretty much in lockstep with the governor's actions. That's certainly one thing for the legislature to consider. Credit ratings can have a small impact, incremental changes on the state's borrowing costs. But ultimately, our advice to the legislature over the years is to consider the whole range of state priorities. Bond ratings are certainly one of them, but the legislature has a broad range of priorities that it should consider in thinking about a budget.
Thank you, Mr. Sisney. We have a few folks for public comment. This is on the Prop 98 package. Please come forward again, if you could, within a minute, please.
Good afternoon. Atasi Upal from the National Center for Youth Law. On behalf of a coalition of organizations committed to foster youth, we're requesting that this committee align the Foster Youth Services Program, or FYS, with LCFF and provide a $30 million budget augmentation to fund that alignment. We're excited that the Assembly has included this augmentation in their Prop 98 budget plan. We respectfully request that the Senate also continue to support the effective implementation of LCFF by augmenting the FYS budget in their education budget plan. This would allow FYS to fully realize the potential of LCFF. FYS defines foster youth much more narrowly than LCFF does, leaving about 2/3 of foster youth without very valuable FYS services. And the FYS program has a proven track record. Thank you.
Thank you.
Enrique Roacho with the California Association of School Business Officials in support of the funds for the home-to-school transportation equalization. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rocho.
Nicholas Chavez on behalf of the School Transportation Coalition and the California Association of School Transportation Officials, also in support of the funding for transportation to schools. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Terry Burns, California School Boards Association. We also support the home-to-school transportation adjustment. We would prefer to see the funds remain in LCFF, complete flexibility under the governor's proposal. But if you are going to go forward with the per teacher, per diem rate, the professional development plan, we would like to see the language include administrators and other certificated individuals so that our counselors, our school site principals all get that same level of training.
Thank you, Ms. Burns.
Good afternoon, Martha Alvarez on behalf of the San Diego Unified School District. Our stand is pretty simple. We align with the governor's proposal, which is ongoing money should be used for LCFF. It should help us be able to meet all of our local requirements and needs. The one-time money should be appropriated for mandates and the discretionary block grant that the governor's proposing. So we would just urge the legislature to go with the $3.6 billion that the governor's proposing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Alvarez.
Good afternoon. I'm Rona Sheriff. I'm with the California EDGE Coalition, a coalition of business, labor, and social justice organizations. Talking about adult ed, we want to echo some of the concerns raised by the Ledge Analyst's Office. We think primarily that we've supported the revisioning and the refunding of adult ed, but the goals were to move people and transition them into employment and post-secondary ed. We need outcomes and metrics that they report on the use of their money, and that's left out of the trailer bill language. And also, we'd like the consortia to have some flexibility to allocate money based on the needs assessments they've done in the regions in the past year. So we support the LAO recommendations.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and members, Brian Rivas on behalf of the Education Trust West. We're asking that you revisit the status of funding to implement new standards. My organization is concerned that we as a state are on track for an uneven implementation of the new standards, and if all students aren't similarly situated with prepared teachers and adequate materials, we're concerned that we're running the risk of exacerbating the achievement gap. With respect to the administration, we think the May revision clouded the issue with providing funding on a one-time basis that is really funding to reimburse the cost of outstanding mandate claims. And we think that that's really just funding that's being provided for costs already incurred. So we're asking that you revisit that issue, and we would love to see the language on the educator effectiveness for the $800 million for the educator effectiveness.
Thank you, Ms. Rivas.
Good afternoon, Deborah Brown with Children Now. I note our continued appreciation and support for the governor's office and the Senate for the increased funding for LCFF. We think the sooner we can get to full funding, the better off we are in terms of equity. We also support the Senate's approach to the revenues and using the Legislative Analyst's Office numbers. I would note that on the use of the one-time funding, we are concerned about the educator effectiveness language and would like to see what that means. And we would also support a one-time set aside for Common Core and NGSS implementation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown.
Leticia Garcia on behalf of Riverside County Schools in support of the home to school transportation proposal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Leilani Aguinaldo on behalf of the Los Angeles Unified School District. We don't have a position on the level of funding that's used in the governor's May revision proposal versus the staff recommendations in the Senate. However, we do encourage the greatest amount of funding to be used for implementation of the local control funding formula. And we do also encourage the use of as much discretion as possible to be given to local districts for one-time dollars. Thank you.
Thank you.
Patrick McCallum, I'd like to just address the adult ed issue here rather than take more of your time, but from San Diego, LA, Los Rios, Peralta Community College District. This is going to be a critical issue when you come into the $500 million adult ed. It's a big game changer, going to change how we do it. But how you have done the MOE is the right way to do it. You've gone with the governor's suggestion. How the Assembly has done it is broadened it out. There could be no money left for these collaborations to work within it, so we hope you'll help us address that issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCallum. Senator Block.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, this package of items, Prop 98, is huge and important. And we could spend hours discussing each of the line items, which we have done in sub 1, so we don't have to do today. Frankly, it's a wonderful package after several years, those of us who've been here for a while, of cuts and of, at best, steady budgets. Being able to fund all these important programs is what we came here for, frankly. So what we're funding here, we have the dollars to do this because California has grown its economy. And many of the programs we're funding today will incentivize further growth in California's economy, resulting hopefully in more dollars in the future to split between these wonderful programs. K-12 and community colleges are clearly the engine that drive our economy. And to the extent that this budget funds those programs that are those that we in the subcommittee have found to be the most effective in driving our economy, I would urge my colleagues and I would move to adopt the Prop 98 package.
Thank you, Senator Block. We do have a motion. Senator Morlock, then Senator Stone, Senator Hancock, Senator Nielsen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry that my button is sort of sticking, so I apologize.
Go right ahead.
You know, getting back to maybe an argument of whether the cup is half full or half empty and how we look at things, I'm just concerned when we take a higher estimate, my first question out of two is what happens if we don't achieve that estimate? What if we expected $3 billion more, but we only get $1.5 billion? What do? We just have a budget overrun, or does someone put the brakes on and just parse it out as it comes in, and so we don't overspend?
Yeah. So just historically, I have some numbers here if you're interested.
I think we would just
that over the past few years, there has been, for example, 14, 15, the Department of Finance and Legislative Analyst's Office had a difference of $2.2 billion. The Department of Finance being the lower figure, we went with it. The Legislative Analyst was much closer. In 13-14, there was about a $3 billion difference with the Department of Finance having the lower projection. We went with it. The actual was almost exactly the LAO's projections. So we have some historical performance there. I don't think anyone would argue with the suggestion that Department of Finance is doing its job with being very conservative. LAO, I think, has no dog in the race. They're trying to give us clearer projection. Of course, it is all projection. We cannot know. But we do have reserves for that situation that you are suggesting is always a possibility, Senator
Okay, so what we approve, we spend. And if we don't receive it, then we dip into reserves to make up the delta. So that
would be among our options.
Okay, and then of the $800 million
we always have the opportunity to take corrective action. So spending is according to what we decide by June 15th. Circumstances change, we can take new actions that would impact our spending going forward.
Do we do that through a bill, or?
It would be, we would have to change statute, yes.
Okay, and so then on the $800 million, since we have large unfunded liabilities for retiree medical and for the CalSTRS unfunded liability in the pension system, why don't we allocate a portion of that $800 million to at least be designated for those desperate needs? That would be something that we discussed in sub 1. I just want to raise it again here. Thank you, Mr.
Again,
Chair.
all a matter of priorities.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sure. Senator Stone, then Senator Hancock, and Senator Nielsen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I recognize the strong importance of supporting education, especially early childhood education, as we've discussed many times at Budget Sub 3. As many of you know, I actually come from the private sector and got into politics through some anger management issues. And I'll tell you that the therapy is still working coming here. But I might add, and I say that respectfully and with some humor, tongue-in-cheek, one of the things that I heard on the campaign trail is that we need more money going into the classroom. And while I appreciate the $800 million for these services that we can't even articulate what they're going to do with much detail, I'd rather see the $800 million going into the classrooms for the positive benefit of our kids. I can also tell you, and I'm not ashamed to say it, I've been a successful capitalist. I've owned a number of businesses. I still operate businesses while I'm here. And one of the most important factors in my success is I don't spend more than I take in, that I budget based on true numbers, true revenue expectations. And frankly, the legislature here is betting on the come. They're betting on the come with some big dollars. And I have to be honest with you, I never expected in my first term in my first year, in my first session, to be so closely aligned with Governor Brown on so many issues. But I'm very proud that our governor is being austere in wanting to pay down debt, wanting to pay down pensions, putting a respectable amount of money into our childhood education programs. And we've heard the complaints that we've got to make up for the cuts in the past. Well, the cuts in the past have occurred because of the lack of fiscal restraint in the past. So we know the economy runs in cycles. We should learn by our mistakes in the past. We should budget what we have available to us this year. Next year, if we realize an extra $3-4 billion that the LAO expects us to make, next year is the appropriate time to start budgeting for that. Because, like my colleague, Mr. Morlock said, if we fall short, then we're going to be having the discussions of going into reserves, rainy day funds that we take great pride in. I'm also concerned about our credit rating. I believe that Wall Street is looking at us, and they're seeing that we're spending money that we do not have. And if they do that, if we do that, we are putting our taxpayers at risk. Why would we do that? We can always come back at mid-year if necessary. We're the legislature, right? So if we have an indication that we're on track to getting these revenues, then why not begin to fund programs based on having those funds available? So again, education is important to me. I want to fund it. I want to make sure we have a good educated workforce. I want to take care of our kids at an earlier age, invest in them. I'd rather invest before than later in our legal judicial system. But, you know, we've got to start taking an entrepreneurial approach to running government. It can't be like it has been in the past and to spend, spend, spend. We don't have a revenue problem in the state of California. We have a spending problem in the state of California, and my friends, with all due respects, Prop 30 is going to come to an end unless this body or a signature campaign puts it on for an extension. Also, there's an 800-pound gorilla sitting in the room that nobody's even talking about, and that is that we, as a state, are going to have to start contributing a significant amount of money to the Affordable Health Care Act. So I know what the vote's going to come down here today, and I don't want to be someone who said, I told you so. But we're being told now that in 1819, we're looking at $2.5 billion in the red. And we're going to wonder why we're cutting the programs, these great programs for these people that have suffered so much in the past, rather than stabilizing our allocations based on our true revenue estimates and adjusting our allocations to support the programs that are dear to many of us. But let's just make sure we can afford them. We have a lot on our plate, and I hope that we support the governor in trying to get this state back on track. I think the governor is really working hard to do that, but he needs the support of the legislature to realize that dream of getting us with a good fiscal footing so that we can be back in the business of trying to recruit businesses back in the state that are going to pay taxes, so that residents will move back into the state, pay their property taxes, and pay their sales taxes so that we can further enhance our educational system there in the state of California. And I appreciate you letting me have a chance to articulate.
Thank you, Senator Stone, and welcome to your first Budget Committee